You are ultimately going to experience less adventures if you always need to go with a partner. That's just a cold hard fact. Today I'm going to go over tips for solo hiking and backpacking so that you can finally take that trip that you've always wanted. Quick story. I have been planning a climb with different partners for the last month and a half, and you know what? It hasn't happened. It wasn't until I just finally decided to say screw it and go solo by myself midweek that this climb actually happened, and I was able to get 3 more 14ers done to get to 40 out of the 58 for the season. I also had a trip with the Teton Crest Trail that I've rescheduled 2 times to go with 2 different people, and neither one has happened. So this is unfortunately an adventure I'm probably going to have to push to 2026. And this is the problem with relying on doing adventures with partners. It is a truth that if that's what you're always relying on, you are definitely going to be going on less adventures than if you learn the skill of doing it solo. And that's what we're really going to be going over in this podcast. Tips and tricks to make sure that you can actually get on that adventure that you want to do. Real quick before we get into that, let's go back into the partner thing. If you have flaky friends, or I would say that it's a coin flip when you make a plan with somebody, if they're actually going to follow through with it. Whether that's a backpacking trip, a camping trip, a hunting trip, anything like that. And the reason is, I don't really know what the reason is. I think people value comfort a lot. And I think when the trip starts to come up, they get nervous, they get anxious, and then they end up canceling. My Gannett Peak trip almost didn't happen because and this wasn't any fault to him, but my one friend missed a flight because a bridge was down. I had another friend that actually just bailed because of the weather window. And my third friend, you'd think out of 3 people that were coming, at least one of them would come, right? The third one finally did come, but he almost did it because he had a flight get canceled. So this just goes to show you, like, Gannett Peak would have never happened for me this year if I didn't have basically, let's just say I just planned it with those 2 people. So you need to make sure that your partners aren't flaky, number one. And if it is a big trip, you're probably going to want to plan on, if you really absolutely need a partner for it, you're probably going to have to plan on more than one partner going because, like I said, it's a coin flip whether or not that one person will actually end up joining you on that trip for whatever reason. But let's say that you don't have any partners anyway, but you've been toying with the fact that you want to do things solo because you do realize that it opens up just a world of possibilities when you are comfortable doing things solo. And the first thing is that is because you don't have to coordinate with anybody. Like I just said, I had friends and either they couldn't get off of work, whatever, they didn't want to go with the weather. For whatever reason, they didn't have a good vibe for it, right? You don't have to coordinate with anybody. If you're feeling it, you just go. You can move at your own pace. You can leave when you want to. You can wake up when you want to, which is the biggest thing about solo hiking is the flexibility in it. I saw the weather window on Monday, and I think Sunday for this last week, and I just took it. I didn't ask anybody's permission. I just said, I'm going to do this. I didn't have to schedule with anybody. And the problem is that the reason I kept rescheduling this climbing trip that I was talking about earlier was because it was a sketchy trip. It's one that you probably want a partner for because it's class 3, class 4 exposed climbing. But it got to the point where there's only so many weeks of summer left for me before hunting starts. And I needed to get this adventure in because I wanted to get to 40 on the 14ers before that happened. Again, if I had to schedule that with somebody, it would have just never happened, especially the day before. So that's why I love like this solo aspect of getting comfortable with the solo aspect. A couple other really good reasons why I'm a big fan of it, and then we'll get into some of the hurdles. But you're not committed to other people. So whether that's with through hiking or backpacking, you are not tied to their fitness level. You're not tied to their decision making. You don't have to bargain or negotiate with people on what they want to do or where they want to camp. You have entire flexibility and freedom to do that. The next thing is that you have a total pride factor whenever you get done with X adventure. For this particular adventure that I was talking about, I was a little bit not confident with my route finding skills because this is a very exposed, risky, and heavily relying on route finding type of a climb, that I wasn't that confident with it, because this is why, was because I've always gone with a partner that we've bounced route finding off of each other to figure out where to go on this peak, or they would lead. And that really will hamstring your progress when it comes to mountain adventures. Coming back from this particular trip, and like I said, I do a lot of 14ers and a lot of climbs and things like that. Typically, the bigger objectives, I'd like to have a partner because I do like to bounce things back and forth. But ultimately, it has hamstrung my confidence with doing that. Coming back from this trip now, I feel a lot more confident in it. I'm looking at a lot more climbs that I thought that I had to have a partner for, and I'm like, you know what? I can get those done by myself. And I don't have to drag out completing the 14ers by 3 years because I have to try to logistically schedule it with and magically make sure that our schedules line up and our emotions essentially line up to get some of these things done. What else do I have here? So what I also love about, so basically you have your self-reliance because you got to problem solve, right? But you also get into this flow state. And this is really hard to do when you're hiking with someone because you're usually constantly talking to them, or at the time that you stop talking is typically either when things are going bad or you're super extremely tired. And at that point, you aren't really trying to be into this creative flow state, that this nirvana that people are probably, or that I'm trying to talk about here. But when you're by yourself, you can get into these fairly regularly and very easily. And it's a lot of times where I get a lot of really good creative ideas that I like to just write down. Let's get into kind of some of the solo hurdles and then how to overcome some of those things. So I think the biggest thing that people are concerned with, I think there's two big things. It's the loneliness, and I think it's the safety risks. For me, on this particular climb that I was talking about in the Crestones, it was more of a safety risk, right? And this is where decisions can be possibly riskier when you have no group to check your decisions or no team. On the flip side of this, you could also fall into a group think type of thinking when you are with a group or with a team that might lead you down a risky avenue. So there is a balance there. There's also a point where you also might feel like you can take more risks because you have that safety of somebody on the climb with you. I would say my risk tolerance actually goes down, especially when I'm by myself, because of the fact I know that I'm going to have to be the one to haul myself out of here. This one can go either way. To remedy this, what I would definitely recommend, and most people I have these already, but if you don't, it's a really good thing to have, but have an inReach mini device where you can trigger SOS. You can also do this on your iPhone now, I think. You can also text offline. I think why I'm still a fan of the inReach button or the inReach product is because, especially when you're looking at safety devices, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Now, like I said, especially when you're looking at safety devices, this is something that is very critical. If you're looking at something like a chapstick or sunscreen that you're bringing, it's probably not as critical to have 2 of these things to save on weight, especially when you're in the backcountry or backpacked in. But when it comes to a safety device, I think that's something that you should definitely consider having 2 of. And I think that's something why, even if when I upgrade an iPhone and I get this satellite messaging capability, I'm still probably going to bring an inReach mini because it doesn't weigh a lot and it can be a secondary device if I break my phone, if I lose my phone down ravine, if I drop it in a river. I literally lost my phone out of my vest one time down a very steep ravine and almost didn't get to it. Actually trying to get to it. I knocked another rock into it. It kept sliding even more. I didn't think I was going to get to it. And that's why for GPS navigations, not only do I use my phone, but I also download the route on my watch just in case one of those goes down. So that's one thing you can do if you're concerned about some of those safety risks. And also just think about, just be a little more conservative when you're by yourself. I already default like that because of the fact of that I'm in deep by myself. But that is something I think you need to consciously switch your brain to when you are going solo. The next is definitely the loneliness aspect. And this is something that I experience all the time. And I think that I would be remiss. I think most people would be remiss to not bring this up, even if they're the most seasoned solo hiker ever. I think it's romanticized to go on a solo hike because you can get into the flow state. You can get into that creative state. You can really bond with yourself in a way. But it takes time to switch gears into that. When you are inundated with the internet, texting, FaceTiming, being with people in real life, when you get out into the wilderness and there's nobody there and it's completely silent, it will hit you like a wall. On this trip in particular, I only did an overnight by myself, but what I did was I did 3 peaks. And even when I was going up on the first peak on the first day that I was hiking in, I actually had thoughts of saying, oh, maybe I should just do this one and then hike back out. What a stupid thing to think about. I'm already hiked all the way in here, but I still had those thoughts. And it wasn't until I woke up on the next day, probably because I knew also that I was going to be going out that day, but I also was a lot more comfortable doing it by myself. Another example I had with this was on the John Muir Trail. So this is in the Sierra Nevada, which is super isolated, number one. And number two, it was during COVID. So there was nobody on the trail. And you want to talk about loneliness. Like, this was super lonely. I was going northbound on this trail, which already, again, not a lot of people. So occasionally I would pass people coming southbound the other direction, but it was really few and far in between. I've had this but in one of the things too on the John Muir Trails, it was between the loneliness there and then also the altitude was, both of those two things were really kicking my butt. But I knew, and I just told myself, I was like, dude, if I can just get through this feeling, it will all get better. Okay. So how did I do that? Or how do I do that now? There's a couple different things that I love. One thing I really love to do, especially when I'm doing a little more spicier, sketchier things like climbing, is I love to listen to music. And it's got to be a certain type of music. It can't be the metalcore music that I'm typically rocking when I'm in the gym. It's got to be rap. And the reason is it's got to be, or just some type of good vibe music. It just lightens the mood of the entire adventure that you're on. You could be doing the sketchiest thing, but if you have a good vibe song on, it really doesn't feel dangerous at all, which could be a problem. But for me overall, I was comfortable enough on this climb that I could do that stuff with. But it was a real critical thing for me. It's always a real critical thing to me to have the correct music on. And what I like to do is I like to wear the over-the-ear headphones just so I can hear any rockfall coming towards me or anything like that. I don't think AirPods or anything that goes in-ear is a good option for that unless you're on a trail where there's really no risk, except for getting eaten by a bear or somebody coming up from behind you. So actually, yeah, I guess I probably would still go with the over-the-ear headphones. So you could do that. You could do some journaling. I would do that occasionally on the John Muir Trail after every night in my phone. And also, honestly, filming. Vlogging is a really good way to talk to somebody, and even though you're talking to a camera, but it makes you feel like you are experiencing this with somebody, and at least you know that you're going to be sharing this with somebody, down the road. For a limited time, I'm actually offering my free outdoor goals Notion template. I'm actually selling this on Etsy for $8, but I'm offering it free for everybody that's listening to the podcast right now for a limited time. What this is storing all of your information, like your flights, the dates that you're going to go, your calendar, your beta for the adventure, the partners you're going with. It assembles everything all in one area. There's no more fumbling around with trying to cross-reference notes that you copy and pasted off of a blog on your Word document, but then you also have flights on your phone. It's all going to be in one place. I like to create all my goals ahead of time, block out all those dates. I know when I'm going to be going. I know what the goal is. It's templated, so you have all the things that you need to fill out, like permits and everything, in the actual database. No worrying about having to recreate everything. Here's actually a quick review from Etsy. from Elizabeth. She said, this is absolutely perfect, super easy to use, and saved me hours, in all caps, of work. Best purchase I've made in a long time. So that's what we're trying to do for you guys. We're trying to help you out. The only thing that I ask for in return is to sign up for our First Light newsletter, where I share exclusive tips around anything that has to do with being a mountain athlete. Resources that you might not have seen before, videos that are inspiring, all that types of stuff, and I don't bother you with it. It's only about once a month. So for a limited time, grab it now in the show notes below. Back to the episode. The last hurdle with this is that you just have nobody to share the adventure with. And I will say, this is something that it's a pro and con thing. With everything in life, there's a pro and con. With every decision that you make, with every road that you travel, there's pros and cons. And I think this can be one of the bigger cons with going solo. You definitely, you don't get to share the experience with somebody and build that camaraderie with them and then talk about it afterwards. You also don't get really cool pictures of yourself, honestly, when you're only going by yourself. What is replaced by that, though, is all the benefits that we talked about before, the confidence in yourself, a deeper immersion into it, being in that flow state, but also the fact that at least I get a little more extroverted on the trail, and I like to talk with people and hear what they think about the adventure, share those perspectives, or even share the many miles on the trail together. I've met a lot of really cool people, especially during through hikes, by just having this companionship with them through the trail or through a climb. And it's really cool too, because you already know that you probably connect on a lot of levels because of the simple fact that you guys are out there suffering together. And so you already have this almost shared camaraderie together, even before you speak to each other. And it's almost like the further you go in to the backcountry, the better people become. Probably just a consequence of hard work to get in there. And those are the types of people that I really enjoy being around. So let's say you're listening right now and you're thinking, Chad, okay, you sold me on wanting to go solo. I've had a ton of trips this year be canceled because Sally didn't want to go and Jake canceled the day before. And now I'm stuck with, it's the end of summer. I only have a couple weeks left and I need to get an adventure in. So how do I do this? The first thing you need to do is you need to start with a one night or a 1 day solo trip. And what I would do is I would plan this in a familiar place or a well-traveled one for confidence. This can be, if you do both of those two things, if you do both of the familiar trail and a well-traveled one, you're almost getting a 2-for-1 because of the fact that there's going to be people on trail that you could probably talk to, and that would make you feel a little bit safer. But then you're also familiar with the trail, so if something goes where maybe potential risk spots are. In addition to that, it's always great to leave a plan with somebody at home and make sure that they know where you're going to be at, when you're going to return. But then also bring along that InReach Mini. If you are doing an overnight, send them a couple texts at night. That helps a lot of the loneliness. Talk about your day a little bit. And then the last one I would talk about is what I mentioned before, but download music. Get some real good vibe music on there. And in particular, what I really like, in addition to the music, is to put on audiobooks. And again, it's going to be a specific type of audiobook, just like the music was for rap. I love listening to inspiring biographies for my audiobooks. Whether that's an autobiography, whether it's a biography that somebody wrote about somebody, it's got to be inspiring. One of the things that the main book that I listened to on the Colorado Trail was a book by Ed Viesturs, it was a book basically about all 7 summits, him climbing all the highest 7 summits in the world. And what it did for me was it made me feel like I didn't have it as bad as him, what he was having to deal with, all the death around him, with living at frickin' 20,000 feet, going up to 26,000 feet of elevation. Man, what I had was cake compared to that. And so it really put into what I was experiencing into perspective, because when you're out there by yourself, things can blow up. And this is something that I should probably have put into the con. If you start down a bad rabbit trail of thoughts, it can blow up because you're not interrupting that with anything. And so I like interrupting those if I'm getting into something like that, or even if I'm not, just as a contingency plan. I like listening to that type good vibe music, and then also some of those inspiring biographies. I hope you guys stop seeing yourself as someone who just needs a group and always needs to go with a partner, okay? And I hope you start seeing yourself as more capable to take on these adventures. Because I promise you, once you start doing this, you will see your adventures, the amount of them, go up every single summer because you're not relying on other people. If you guys like this podcast, please share it with somebody that would also like it. And please, as a big favor, if you could give a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that would be amazing and make my day. Appreciate you. We'll see you for another podcast.